For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alistair Tudor. I'm the Commercial Operations Manager for Somerset Chamber of Commerce. This is obviously First Thursday Club, so this is all around the construction sector, supporting businesses within construction sector within Somerset. What I will do first off is I'll run quickly around the room as I see you, so be prepared to unmute your microphone and just give a very quick introduction of who you are, what your role is, just a 30-second, 1 minute, and then we'll nip around the room. And I'll end up at Julie Towers from PKF Francis Clark. Julie is going to give us a quick presentation, probably 15 minutes, followed by a Q&A session on the changes to the way that VAT is charged specifically within the construction sector. These are due to come in on 1st of March 2021, and they will affect us all in some way, shape or form if within the sector. And it's really worth understanding how it affects the whole supply chain and what your responsibilities are within that supply chain. So I'm going to start us off with Stephen Henegolf. Can you just unmute yourself and introduce, please?
Hello, good afternoon. My name's Stephen Henegolf. I'm the CEO of Somerset Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you. Natalie?
Hi, I'm Natalie. I'm the project lead for the Hinckley supply chain.
Thank you. Colin?
Colin Whitworth, work for JSP, UK manufacturer above the neck PPE, height safety and traffic management products, although we're based actually near Oxford. I live in Taunton and cover the southwest for the company.
Thanks, Colin. Catherine?
Hi everyone, I'm Catherine Rutherford. I'm a construction lawyer at Ashford's, covering all types of different construction documents for all the different parties that could be part of the transaction. I'm based in Taunton but work from Exeter up to London. I'm really looking forward to hearing this one today because I think it's going to be really relevant.
Thank you very much. Mr. Alan Windsor.
Hello, I'm the information manager for the Hinckley supply chain team, and I deal with all the basically anything computer related or database related, and I'm the one that does the searches to get you good people, your people's company's names in front of the contractors. So yeah, that's me. Thanks, Alan.
Sarah?
Hi, nice to meet you all. I'm a what's called a professional support lawyer at Ashford's and a colleague of Catherine's in the construction team. A big part of my role is knowledge sharing and keeping the team up to date. So I've got particular interest in today's topic so that I can go back and relay to the team.
Lovely, thank you. Fee, nice to see you. You'll need to unmute, Fee, please.
Okay. Technology always good. Yes, I work for Footfall Engineering and Lighting, and I'm their ops manager, also known as General Gopher.
General Gopher with the most salubrious office in the place. Excellent. Jay.
Hi, afternoon all. My name's Jay. I'm the transport manager at Charge Truck Services. We offer a variety of services, but kind of most notably, we supply the bulk water up to Hinkley Point C. So again, kind of interested to hear all about today and what it all brings, really. So, but nice to see you all.
Excellent, thank you. Mark.
Okay, I'm Mark Winston from RK Bell. I'm the FD of RK Bell Projects Limited. Obviously, we've got a vested interest in what's going to happen in the future. I hope it doesn't happen. I've written to our MP to say I don't think it should happen, but whether that makes any difference is another matter. And
may the force be with you on that one.
Yes, well, I'm all in favour of it being cancelled, particularly with all the current economic problems that the country's going to be facing. The last thing we need is more red tape and bureaucracy. And my team are back in the office, and I don't know if they're going to unmute themselves or not, but possibly not.
Well, I tell you what, rather than asking him to do that, do you want to give us a quick? How many people are behind that black screen?
Three. There's Sarah, who's our office manager, Amanda, who does invoicing and payroll for us, and Jack, who's our accounts apprentice, but gets involved in a whole lot more than that, particularly on the IT side, because he's marginally younger than I am.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Okay.
I'll come to Adam next.
Hello, it's my first time to this. Adam Robbins of Halpin Robbins. We're ecological and environmental consultants. The ecology kind of speaks for itself: bats, badgers, dormice, those kind of things. And the environmental side of things is water, waste permitting, doing a lot of work actually in the construction industry. For you guys, you might have come across the Dutch N case law for nutrient stuff. Anyway, we're dealing a lot with that. We work across Somerset and much further. And I'm mainly here to get an idea of what you guys are getting up to.
Excellent. Good to see you, Adam. Thanks very much. Julie?
Hi, I work for Ireland. We've obviously got an IT system. I'm here really because we've got customers that deal with the construction industry, and we need to amend our software to cope with the new legislation.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Terry?
Thanks, Alistair. Good afternoon all. My name is Terry Burke. I work with Naismiths Limited. My job is essentially business development, to engage with funders, developers and investors in the construction sector to provide services from project monitoring to building consultancy to asset recovery. It's good to meet you all. I'm here for two reasons today. One is because in the past, in a previous role, I worked closely with Alistair and Stephen with Somerset Chamber, and I've not had the enjoyment and benefit of that over the last few months while I've been in between roles. So it's really good to be back. And secondly, every time the VAT changes become imminent, I become an expert by reading diligently about it. And then when it comes around again, I've forgotten all about it. So it's to find out a little bit more about it today, and also to meet some new contacts as well. So good to meet you all.
Lovely. Great to see you again, Terry, and nice to know that the support of changing your name on Zoom is appreciated. I'll come to Richard next, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Richard Tempany from Ponsford Insurance Services, based up in North Somerset and Portishead. One of our areas of specialisation is construction and manufacturing, motor fleet and motor trade and haulage. So I'm very interested in hearing about what's going on in the industry and adding some whatever support I can provide.
Excellent, thank you. Sean?
Oh. Hello, yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm Sean. I'm an associate at Bailey Partnership. We're a multidisciplinary construction consultancy. I'm actually based in Taunton, but we sort of cover the southwest, everything from sort of architecture, planning, engineering, and quantity surveying, project management.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Laura, I'll come to you next.
Hello, I am the new events coordinator at the Somerset Chamber.
Lovely, thanks very much. Last but not least, I'll come to Julie from PKF Francis Clark. Julie, whilst you introduce yourself, I'm going to share my screen so that everyone can see your presentation, and we'll get cracking with that.
Okay, hello everybody, and thank you for having me here today. So I'm Julie Towers. I'm a partner just working on VAT at PKF Francis Clark. I'm actually based in our Truro office down in Cornwall, working at home at the moment, but have members of my team, Becky Hayes, who regularly visits our Taunton office. But Becky is on this, I'm actually on another course today, which I've just come out of to do this, and Becky's also on that course. That's why she couldn't make it today. So, Alistair, if you want to move on, please, to the next slide. What I should have said to start off with as well is VAT on land, property and construction, I would say probably forms at least 50% of the work that I do on VAT. It just touches such a lot of things and is a very complex area. So the aim of this today, you may well all be aware that from the 1st of March next year, we are due to have this new system called the domestic reverse charge, which will apply for construction services. So the aim of this session today is basically to make you aware of the issue and when it will apply. I'm not trying to turn you all into VAT experts. So the reason why HMRC are wanting to introduce this system, they use the reverse charge in the UK to combat perceived fraud. So here, the perceived fraud is that a subcontractor or someone who is in the supply chain will charge VAT to their customer. They will then abscond with that VAT without paying it over to HMRC. And I look in the process of these slides at the way that this actually works. first thing to say is that this applies to services where the construction industry is relevant. So if your services have to be reported within the CIS scheme, then the reverse charge is likely to apply to you. And I'll just go on to a few more caveats in a little bit. And it also applies where both sides of both the supplier and the customer are VAT registered in the UK, and the services in question are subject to VAT at either the standard or the reduced rate. So this doesn't apply to new residential build, which would be zero rated for VAT purposes. So as we said, the implementation date is the 1st of March next year. It has already been delayed twice. It was originally due to come in on the 1st of October 2019. Then 1st of October 2020, HMRC in both those instances quite late in the day have delayed the scheme. I think Brexit was probably the main reason before. As I can't remember who it was, but I know somebody said earlier, we hope it will be delayed again. I still wouldn't mind betting that it will be delayed, but last time I think they only literally gave us 2 to 3 weeks warning that it was being delayed. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is the domestic reverse charge? So in a nutshell, it moves the responsibility of accounting for VAT to the recipient of the supply rather than the supplier. So normally, in a normal supply chain, if VAT is due on construction services, the supplier will charge 20% VAT, he'll pay that VAT over to HMRC, and then the customer will, if he's able, recover that VAT from HMRC. So where the reverse charge applies, what this will mean is that the supplier no longer charges VAT to his customer. What the customer then has to do is he basically has to do a self-accounting. So on his VAT returns, he will pay the VAT over to HMRC and then recover it from HMRC. So if we had the instance here that we had somebody working for a main contractor, so say you're a subcontractor working for Balfour Beatty, as the subcontractor, if you're providing construction services, you would no longer charge VAT to Balfour Beatty, and then Balfour Beatty would have to do this reverse charge accounting, which basically is an in and an out on their VAT return. So for Balfour Beatty, it is neutral. And for you as the subcontractor, you're no longer charging VAT, where you would previously have been charging it, collecting that VAT from your customer. There is a cash flow disadvantage here for the subcontractor, because before, assuming they're on quarterly VAT returns and assuming that their customer pays them regularly, they would have held the benefit of the VAT for up to 3 months before they had to pay it over to HMRC at the end of the quarter. So it will change the pattern of your VAT returns, and I'll look at that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. So just really to just summarise that, the domestic reverse charge applies if both supplier and customer are VAT registered, and the relationship basically, it could be between subcontractors in a supply chain, or it could be between a subcontractor and the main contractor, and the supply is of standard rated or reduced rated services for VAT payments that require you to report them under the CIS scheme. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go into this slide in detail, but this is basically showing the sorts of services that the domestic reverse charge will apply to. So it's basically really anything that is related to actual construction on a project or on a site. Next slide, please. So when will the domestic reverse charge not apply? As I've already mentioned, if the services would be zero rated for VAT purposes, so if you were involved, this would be a new build residential developments where the rate of VAT is 0, you clearly don't need a reverse charge because there's no opportunity there for the supplier to abscond with VAT because there isn't any. If your customer is not registered for VAT in the UK, the reverse charge won't apply. And if the services don't fall within the CIS scheme, again, the domestic reverse charge will not apply. It also doesn't apply to employment businesses where all they are doing is supplying workers or staff. So if all you're doing is supplying construction workers to a third party, where those construction workers basically become as if they were employees of that third party, the domestic reverse charge doesn't apply there. It is only if you are actually providing construction services that it applies. And then the end category, where it also doesn't apply, is if your customer is an end user. So if we were using Hinkley Point as an example here, if you're in a supply chain and you are supplying Balfour Beatty with services, because Balfour Beatty are selling on those services to EDF, the end consumer, you would charge Balfour Beatty VAT. However, because Balfour Beatty are supplying, in effect, the end user, they're not supplying on construction services, then they charge VAT as normal to the end user. So it's the reverse charge responsibility literally stops with the person who is not going to be supplying on construction services. Hopefully that makes sense. Next slide, please. So this is just a list, and again, I'm not going to go into these in detail. This is just a list of exclusions from CIS reporting. They're basically, these are services that don't fall within the CIS scheme. One of the most notable there, and I know this will affect a few people in the audience, is it does not apply to professional services. So architects, surveyors, consultants, solicitors, it does not apply to your services at all. So they would still be subject to VAT at 20%, whatever the situation. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is looking at who and what is an end user. So where you're providing construction services, you're going to need to know when these rules come in, you're going to need to know if your customer is an end user, because if they are, you will just continue to charge them VAT as you always have done. So as I said, the final consumer or the final customer is the one who is not themselves making an onward supply of construction services. So in the example of Hinkley Point, that would be EDF. So any invoices going to them would be under the normal rules. So they might be using the services for their own property or their own development. Another example there could be you might be doing construction for a supermarket, say Tesco, in building a new supermarket for them. So they are an end user because they're selling baked beans or whatever it might be. They're not selling construction services on. And it is a matter of fact, you can't choose whether or not you're an end user. You either are or you're not. There is also the concept of having an intermediary supplier that is linked to an end user. So if we took the example of building a new building for a supermarket, then Tesco may well have their own construction company. If you are dealing with Tesco's construction company, because where they're in a corporate group, you basically view that construction company as if they were the end user. So you would again charge VAT as normal and not use the reverse charge. HMRC, they actually haven't issued very much guidance, but one thing that they have said is to put the onus on the customer, so that the person receiving the supplies, to confirm whether or not they are an end user. So if you as a supplier are unsure whether your customer is an end user and they haven't confirmed for you, then you should still treat the supply as if using the reverse charge procedure. So that would be the default position from the 1st of March. Next slide, please. So this slide is just basically a flowchart that will help you walk through those steps to try and establish whether the normal VAT rules apply or whether you need to use the domestic reverse charge. And I should have said as well, I think Alistair, if he hasn't, will be sending around a copy of all these slides to you. Next slide, please. Alistair, can you just let me know how I'm going on time? Okay, right. So these last few slides are really just looking at the practical side. So this slide, and I, again, don't propose to go into this in detail because probably a lot of you I don't think would be involved in actually preparing the VAT returns. But this slide is just showing whether you're the supplier or the customer, what the actual accounting transactions will be on your VAT returns, which will be different to how they are at the moment. What I would say is, and as I think I mentioned earlier, the reverse charge isn't a new concept. So we do already have the reverse charge or the domestic reverse charge in the UK for certain types of supply. So it isn't a new concept. So a lot of accounting packages should already have appropriate codes that you can use to account for the reverse charge. So just on there, I've given the appropriate codes in Sage, Xero and QuickBooks, which are probably the most common software packages that a lot of our clients use. Next slide, please. Okay, so on your invoices, so if you are a supplier and the domestic reverse charge applies, then your invoices will look a bit different. So they will need to state that the domestic reverse charge applies and say customer to pay the VAT to HMRC. And they should also show the amount of VAT and the rate applicable, which is basically telling the customer the amount of VAT he has to pay over to HMRC and then reclaim. I think that is just basically just making it very, very clear what the understanding is. Again, I think that hopefully most accounting packages should, by the time this comes in, have the capability of ensuring that that is automatic in the system. If, when you're invoicing, you have some services that are both fall under the CIS and some that don't, and they're on the same invoice, then the reverse charge applies to the whole of the invoice. And likewise is if there are CIS reportable services and materials, again, you apply the domestic reverse charge treatment to the whole invoice. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you have a contract that basically spans the 1st of March 2021, so it's an ongoing contract, and this is probably quite logical, if at any tax point, so the tax point is the date that determines when you account for VAT. If any tax point is before the 1st of March, then you just invoice as you normally would at the moment. And the tax point will be either issuing an invoice or receiving a payment from your customer if that's earlier. But as soon as we get to any tax points on or after the 1st of March, then the reverse charge will apply. I'm going to skip over flat rate because that's probably just a bit too much detail for today. If your business is on cash accounting, then you might want to look to going on to invoice accounting, because with the cash accounting, that really is only a benefit that you don't have to pay VAT over to HMRC until your customer pays you. And if you will no longer have any VAT, there's no benefit to being on cash accounting. One point that I mentioned earlier is that this could well affect your cash flow because you will no longer be holding VAT until you pay it over to HMRC. So if you have no VAT to pay to HMRC, you will only have VAT on your incoming purchase invoices, which will turn you into repayment trader. So what you might want to look to do is to go onto monthly VAT returns to help your cash flow. Next slide, please. All right, this is just the view from HMRC. And when this was going to be introduced before, they did say that they would take a light touch approach for 6 months. And I would expect that still to be the case, assuming it comes in on the 1st of March next year. And I wouldn't mind betting their light touch might last for longer than that, because I think they're going to have their hands full with issues looking at Brexit, as well as the implications of COVID as well. They have said that they will charge penalties and assess output VAT if people are incorrectly using the reverse charge. And also that they might enforce action against recipients to make them responsible for VAT and the correct treatment. But this is all fairly typical things that HMRC would say. And next slide, which is the final slide. So really just to try and summarise and have a bit of a checklist. So it's really on the assumption that this is going to come in, is to check now whether you are acting as a supplier or a customer, whether you think the reverse charge will affect the sales that you make. And again, that's going to depend, as I've explained, as to where you are in the supply chain, but really to be clear whether you or your customer is an end user or not. And basically to make sure, again, that your suppliers and customers, you're quite clear with them on whether they have the end user status or not. What would be useful here is to perhaps have a declaration that goes into a contract with your customer if they are an end user, so you know that you would charge them VAT, just so that all parties are clear. Next is to make sure that your accounting systems will be able to cope with the domestic reverse charge. So again, that might be contacting your software suppliers to make sure that they're on board with everything. And then, as I've mentioned, consider the cash flow implications and whether or not you might want to go onto monthly VAT returns. And then on the very final slide, there are just some links, firstly to our website, and then yesterday I think we put on our website a fact sheet and some FAQs on the reverse charge as well. So any questions? That was really a whistle-stop tour and sort of quite high level, so hopefully it made sense.
Yeah, that was excellent, and certainly it's raised some questions that I've got. I will open the floor to 2 questions. It's not a massive group, so if anybody does want to unmute, feel free to. I guess, you know, from the point of view of being in that supply chain, and communication with your customers and suppliers is absolutely key here, and making sure that the status of them is correct in each individual project, because I guess you might be working with some suppliers who might be in the supply chain for one project, but then an end user with another project.
That is quite possibly the case. It's almost like if you are in that position, looking at it on a contract by contract basis, and both sides being very clear on what the status is. Actually, one thing that I should have said is that and I think there is still a lot of people who aren't aware of these changes. So I very much suspect that come 1st of March, and probably smaller subcontractors, could be your plumbers, your electricians, that sort of thing, may well just continue as they have always done and to carry on charging VAT on their invoices. If that is the case, if you're big enough to have a purchase ledger team or whoever is processing your purchase invoices, they should be aware that if they are still receiving invoices that charge VAT when they shouldn't be, because they should be under the reverse charge, that those invoices should be rejected. Because if you recover that VAT, as far as HMRC is concerned, it's incorrectly charged and they would disallow it. So it's to try to have a process in place to go back to your suppliers if they carry on charging VAT when they shouldn't do.
Makes sense. Okay, so
there are a couple of questions, if I may. First of all, thank you very much. Really comprehensive. You mentioned that the reverse VAT process isn't new to HMRC and that it's being used within other sectors. Do you know where there are examples of that happening?
Yes, it's in the mobile phone industry and also wholesale supplies of gas and power. So and those are also areas that have been subject to a lot of fraud in the past.
Okay.
It does also apply if you, as a customer, purchase services from outside the EU. That's not the domestic reverse charge, but if you say are buying services in from a supplier, just say in the USA, there is also a reverse charge that applies there. The concept is the same. It's just a slightly different reverse charge.
Brilliant. I suspect there will be a number of the panel that will be going to the links that you've put on the last slide.
Yeah.
I think my concern is the amplification and communication to businesses. You know, we are, and this is no fault of PK Francis Clark. We're in the midst of a pandemic. We're in the midst of planning less than 100 days to Brexit, and HMRC have deemed it to be, until we hear different.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
A date. You know, you couldn't wish for a more perfect storm.
And I think this is very much, I think, almost under the radar at the moment.
Yeah. This is our concern as a business organisation, and particularly within construction, that's so very important to the Southwest. The HMRC were doing this with making tax digital, and we were getting quite a lot of pushback from business saying, I didn't realise once I swapped over I couldn't do the old way, you know, VAT out on the kitchen table as I do my year-end tax, and I suspect this is going to be the same. It's rather alarming as well. You've identified that invoices could be rejected, particularly you know, going to the first quarter of next year in cash flow. The other question I had, just to understand, it's interesting you mentioned Balfour Beatty. Balfour Beatty as a PLC has a number of subsidiary companies. So if they were engaged to build something and then they used one of their companies within their portfolio to put the electrical systems in, for example, to physically do the first or second phase electrical, would they, because they're ultimately all owned by the same, not reverse, or would they revert?
They would. It would depend whether or not those companies were in a VAT group. So if the Balfour Beatty companies are in a VAT group, then they wouldn't have to consider the VAT because they're treated as if they're one entity.
Right.
But if they are separately registered, then they would also have to consider the reverse charge.
Okay, this is going to make it very interesting. Natalie, I can see Natalie's cogs turning in terms of the supply chain of 4,500 that we look after for Hinckley, and if we're starting to get questions on that. Sorry, I'll monopolise. Does anybody else have any questions?
I was going to say I'm going to come to Sarah next if I can.
Thank you. Yeah, just one question. I was just wondering, what's the rationale for excluding end users from the provisions?
That's a very good question. Actually, off the top of my head, I probably should know this, but off the top of my head, I'm actually not sure. Because I'm just thinking of the other domestic reverse charges, and I don't think there it would finish. Actually, probably the logic is that the end user is in effect like the end consumer of those services. So I think that's probably why. So the VAT should end up as a charge with the consumer, and I think in this it is the end user is seen as the consumer of the services. So I think that's why why it's the basic of VAT.
Yeah, I see.
But good question.
Thank you.
Anything that stumps Julie is a good question. Did anyone else have any more questions specifically on the VAT charges? Okay, lots to consider. I will be sharing this presentation with you afterwards, so all those links and details will be coming out. I'm going to throw the floor open. Obviously, we're just about to, or we have just entered another lockdown. Certainly when we talk to businesses at the beginning of April, sort of March time earlier in the year when this lockdown started, or the first lockdown started, there was a lot of uncertainty. I'm quite interested to hear how businesses are reacting this time and how it will affect your business. Has anybody got anything they'd like to bring in on that one? I know obviously, Jay, you said that everyone's in at Chard Truck Services. Is that the same as the last time out?
Yes, I think it's a bit more, I don't know whether it's personal feeling to everyone, but I think there's less, how do I put it? People are just getting on with it. So
yeah, do you get the impression that this lockdown will be quite different in terms of the attitude and approach to than the last one?
Definitely, and that both in terms of customer and in terms of governing bodies. So people like the DVSA and the Traffic Commissioner, they've come out straight away and said truck MOTs and all these exemptions that they released on tachographs and amendments to EU drivers rules, that hasn't happened. So I think they're thinking that, right, let's try and keep as much as we can do going. And if it's 4 weeks, if it's 8, 10, 12 weeks, whatever Michael Gove thinks, then it may change, but no, certainly our customers are kind of business as usual. Nothing will change, I don't suspect.
Adam, I can see that you unmuted yourself.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. I wasn't sure if you wanted to add to that.
No, I mean, we as a business are a little bit strange. Our first lockdown was really annoying because that's the peak ecology season, which was kind of wiped out. We had 2 crazy months where we weren't in lockdown, and then now going into this next one, our ecology season has ended. So we're now switching over more to our waste and permitting side of the works. And that's going on as normal. The only difference now, even with the lockdown side of things, is wherever we go, we are now socially distanced in our conversations and wearing the appropriate PPE if required. So for what we're experiencing and the construction guys that we're dealing with, there doesn't seem to be that much of a change. That's our experience of it. It'd be interesting to hear everybody else's.
Yeah. Anybody else got anything to
One
add?
thing, while we've been on this, the Chancellor's announced that furlough will continue to the end of March.
Is that at the current rate, 80%?
He hasn't said that. Mr. Sunak said the scheme will pay up to 80%, but they haven't confirmed if it's going to be like the last one where it slowly, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so that maybe is hinting that they think that this lockdown might go on a little longer than maybe 2nd of December. Okay. Anyone else got anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose from my distance point of view, we're pretty much all our sites are open. We did shut about 50% of our sites in the previous lockdown, so we're all kind of fully open and expected to stay open. I don't know, that news about the furlough being extended to March might prove a bit of an enticement to people, some people, to stand some of their people down again. So, you know, it might actually have a negative effect in some ways on the economy, but I'm just thinking those business users, those business runners and owners that are perhaps teetering on the edge a bit will put people out to furlough again.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we as the Chamber of Commerce are always saying is that business needs certainty. Business needs to know what's going to come up and what's just over the horizon. So it's an interesting announcement to make now as we head into a lockdown, on kind of day one of lockdown, but at least it does give some certainty to businesses that maybe are looking at furloughing staff, and particularly within the hospitality catering sector, where the effects might be felt you know, for longer. You know, that might be a very good thing for them to hear. It'd be interesting to see how it affects the construction sector, certainly. Anything else that anybody else wanted to mention? Okay, quick question for the room. I mean, in terms of this VAT scheme, we know it's been kicked down the road twice for various reasons. Do we think it's actually going to stop fraud? Is it fit for purpose? You know, forget everything else, forget Brexit and coronavirus. Is it actually going to do the job, do we think? Any opinions on that? I'll take it that no one's quite sure, and certainly I think, you know, it could be interesting to see if it does gets moved further away. I'm not sure that March the 1st is going to be the best time of the year, especially if the furlough scheme's you know, pushed on, but best to be prepared. Is there any other sort of business before we wrap up? I'll hand over to Steve in a moment. Anything that anybody else wanted to bring up for the room or ask questions on? Okay, excellent. I'm going to hand over to Stephen Henegolf then.
Thanks, Alistair. First of all, thank you all for attending the First Thursday Construction Club. As the name suggests, it's a fairly easy one to work out. We will be operating in December. I think from my point of view, as the CEO of an organisation that represents a massive variance of businesses and firms across the county of Somerset, both in service manufacturing, from nuclear, cheese, right the way across to service the service industry, I'm slightly concerned now in terms of Alan's identification of the extension of furlough further adds to my concern. I think we haven't actually changed, and this is, I always say, we're not a political organisation. Nothing has actually changed since the Friday the 13th of March of this year, in terms of we still don't have widespread trace and testing systems across the UK. We still don't have a cure for this, and we still don't have a vaccine. So the challenge to businesses is, you know, and I was pretty vocal on this the other day when we were on radio, was that we've done as businesses, we've done exactly everything that we have been told to do in terms of social distancing, putting in preventative measures. I know JSP will have seen a huge increase in above the neck respiratory and protection, because that's what the government has asked us to do. Hand sanitizer, making a pod of desks for actually only occupy one person. And we're getting across the UK, certainly from the other county chambers, and there are 53 of those, and I talked to the CEOs, a sense of frustration that actually, if the basics were in place, if widespread quick track and trace was in place for an employer, so that if there was something that had happened within the organisation with an employee, they could get a 24-hour, in fact, same-day turnaround, that would be incredibly useful. But I also get a sense that businesses are now saying that, you know, we've got the impending removal of our country from the European Union on the 1st of January 2021. That isn't going away. That's less than 100 days. That announcement that Alan just picked up says to me that, you know, the government is perhaps playing slightly with our emotions, that they're telling us that there might be a little bit of Christmas to look forward to. But extending furlough for another 3 months into the start of 2021 says to me that's not where we're going to be. What's the general feeling in terms of businesses? is this it in terms of your frustration, or have you adapted, and can you get through another one even if we get into the first quarter of 2021?
Stephen, I think it's not a question of how we adapted. We've had to adapt. Every business has had to adapt. I see it all the time, and I think we'll have to do it again. I don't think this is the last lockdown. If we're to believe that there is a vaccine to come, great. Whether it'll work or not, who knows? But I rather suspect we'll be doing this for another 6 months, and I don't mean to be sort of depressing about it, but I think that's a realistic view, and I think we should plan our businesses accordingly. But there was the change I see is that, as Jay was saying, I don't think no one's panicking now. Everyone's thinking, right, well, we pretty much know what to do. If the government sorts its act out, then we may see some improvements. But ultimately, until we get some kind of cure-stroke vaccine for this is just going to keep coming back.
Yeah,
simple as that. That's the nature of the beast.
Sorry, I suppose the sad thing about it is investment-wise, and people with money to invest in property and development, and if you like, fuel the construction industry. We've seen it quite busy. We've seen a lot of people talking about quite big, ambitious schemes up and down the southwest, and so, I think it's kind of, the obstacle is obviously this disease, which just is holding everything back. But in terms of business sentiment, I think it is still there, and that's the dilemma everybody faces.
Yeah, I don't want to. This is not a doom gloom discussion, because we've seen massively that there are some areas, some businesses, some organisations and firms that have capitalised, have changed their trading practices, their working practices, whether that's they've moved across to a digital platform, or indeed, and we cite the example, we've a number of companies that have used the bounce back loan at 2.5%, nothing to repay until 2021, to purchase a competitor, to buy some equipment, to invest in new people. So it isn't all. I think, the frustration certainly from the southwest, which is, and I speak about my colleagues in Devon, Dorset and Cornwall specifically, and their members' requirement for or reliance on destination marketing, day trippers, hospitality, hotels, etc. It's another massive blow to them. But we've got pockets of manufacturing and service industry which are absolutely flourishing. Natalie will tell you that the HBC project up at Hinckley has been classed as critical infrastructure, and that has continued right the way through. So that project is on target and is still moving forward. There was positive news about the potential commissioning of an operation for Sizewell C, a sister station to HPC. We know that HS2 has now been given the go-ahead. There's a local company up at Shepton Mallet that has picked up a huge contract for the track. So it's just, I guess, the sentiment I get to hear from businesses, and as we talk to other CEOs, I talk to other CEOs across the UK, is the frustration that if the basics were in place, if they could get an employee tested almost immediately or turn around quickly, but they tell me that they have an employee who says that I may have COVID, I've been on the phone for most of the morning, I can't get through, and when I do get through, I live in Bridgewater and they've asked me to go to Cardiff tomorrow. And I suppose that's the bit that I'm trying to eke out as to whether we know that one of our members, in fact, has been through that. I'm looking at Alistair, and we were going to use them once they've been through the wretched situation as a case study to understand how quickly it is. But it's that testing bit, I think, is causing the frustration.
Yeah, I think it's always going to support business to get members of staff back in as quickly as possible, isn't it? Terry, I'm going to put you on the spot here. You're dealing with investors within the construction sector. We've touched on that a couple of times. Are you seeing activity increase, decrease?
Yes, and yes, we are. We are seeing. So there's a lot of money out there in the marketplace where people are prepared to invest and put that in. So just as Andy mentioned, I wouldn't use the word buoyant, but there is lots of activity and lots of interest in lots of schemes up and down the country. So at Naismiths we are not predicting any real kind of downfall in terms of activity. and we're quite hopeful that it will grow in the coming months. I think coming back to the original question about how businesses more on a wider scale are going to be impacted, Stephen, I think it also very much depends on the continued support of government schemes and also funders, because I think Alan just mentioned they've extended furlough, which will have a positive effect. CBILS has been extended and possibly will be extended beyond the end of November. Who knows? But it's not a bottomless pit of money available, and it's got to stop somewhere. But what you do find as well is with the funders out there who are supporting businesses, some of the funders, I guess the tier one high street banks, they're very much just looking after their existing debt, and they don't want to extend any further funds out currently, whereas some of the challenger banks and independents are probably still keen to do business and support, but they're a lot more risk averse. And of course, there's the restrictions on winding up businesses. If that is reversed at any point soon, I think that could have a big impact, certainly at the lower end of the sector.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you, Terry. I just want to say a thank you again to Julie Towers from PKF, Francis Clark. Really, really useful. And definitely, I think you'll find that the links will be used, because it's still there's still a lot of understanding there, and I think hedged by, and as you've experienced, Julie, the potential that we could see a couple of weeks before.
I know, that is just so frustrating.
Incredibly frustrating. But as Alistair says, businesses are pretty good at adapting. We're testament to that. Alistair, if I can hand back to you and thank everybody for joining the Somerset Chamber of Commerce First Thursday Construction Club meeting today. Alistair, the floor's yours.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll just behave like good Boy Scouts and brownies and prepare, I guess, on the basis that it will happen. So thank you all for attending. I will share the presentation with you, or it will come out via Laura to you all afterwards. And we are recording this, so we'll make sure you've got a copy of the recording as well if you wanted to review back over it. Obviously, Julie's contact details will be in the confirmation and the thank you email as well, so feel free to contact Julie if you've got any questions. Thank you very much. The next one is obviously on the first Thursday of December. We'll make sure you've got a link in there to attend on the 3rd of December as well. So hopefully see you then. All the best. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Thanks.